So you said that during this time you started wrestling?
Yeah, I started wrestling in 1990. It was June of 1990. Sorry. Excuse me. And I'll tell you how I got started. Coming out of a bad home, I had a pretty rough childhood, rough life. My mother was divorced 4 times. My father's been legitimately married 13 times. So at about the age 14, I was basically turned out into this world on my own. I slept in gutters. I fucking slept in a gas station bathroom to get out of the goddamn cold. Got put in juvenile hall because foster homes, nobody really wanted a 14-year-old kid. They were interested in a younger kid. And I was put in juvenile hall from the time I was 14 till I was 16 years old. And all I ever wanted to be was a wrestler. That's it. I seen my first wrestling match in 1977. And from that moment on, you could have asked me what I was going to do when I grew up, and I'd tell you, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. That's all I wanted to do. My friends, when I was locked up, would send me wrestling magazines, things like that, to where I could keep up on wrestling, because as I said, that's my only aspiration. And when I got out of juvenile hall, I was offered to go to the job corps, which was in Pine Knot, Kentucky. They gave me the option of either sitting in juvenile hall for another 2 years, or I could go get some kind of an education and maybe see the outdoors, So I went to Pine Knot Corps in Pine Knot, Kentucky. Studied welding and got my GED. But the other cool thing I got to do was I was part of a fire team out there. You see the big forest fires that go on, and you see on the news and things like that. I was part of a fire crew that, because the job corps center that I was on was sponsored by a national forest. Okay, it was a national forest service. And so I was on a fire team there, so when a big fire would break out in a national park or something, I'd have a 50-pound water bag on my back and a rake in one hand, and I'd go out and I'd cut a fire line. That's neither here nor there. So anyways, when I got out of the job corps in that area, excuse me, I got out of job corps right after I turned 17, and was hanging around down in Corbin, Kentucky, where my grandparents lived at, and I seen a sign for an independent show. And I was like, well, these are the guys that are going to get me into wrestling. Like, I'm going to find out from these guys how to get into wrestling. And I went there, and they told me everything under the sun that they could do for me, all the connections they had and everything else. And I sat at their rings up, and understand that I didn't have a car at all. I hitchhiked. So hours just to get there to set up somebody's ring. Maybe get to do a battle royal, tear down their ring, and then hitchhike back to my grandmother's house. So, but in this time period, these guys who were supposedly training me, filling my head full of lies, they had said that when I moved back to Dayton, Ohio, because that's where I'd grown up, that when I moved back to Dayton to get a hold of Al Snow, and Al Snow's, an old friend of theirs, and Al could put me right to work with their training. Excuse me. So, sure enough, I moved back to Dayton, and I called Al up. And I said, hey Al, these guys told me down here that I needed to call you once I moved back. Excuse me. And he said, come up to the gym and I'll take a look at you. So I went to Al's gym, and he put me in the ring, and I realized very quickly that I had been taken by these guys before. Because Al had more wrestling knowledge under his fingernail at that time than I had in my whole body, and it was apparent very quickly. Imagine the embarrassment. That's one thing I take with my training. I would never want my students to ever feel that kind of embarrassment. It's like standing there with your dick out in public, if you can imagine that. Okay, you can't do anything about it. You just got your dick out. Really. And that's basically the way I felt. I've got my dick hanging out in public, and And then I mentioned Al, these guys. Well, this guy told me to come see. I'm not even going to say their names, just so I don't give them any credit for anything. And Al looked me dead in the face and was like, I don't know who you're talking about. And I said, well, what about this guy? He's like, man, I have no idea. And, it said dumbass across my forehead at that point. I felt like the dumbest guy in the world. And Al told me, you need to learn how to wrestle. That's it. So I left Al's. I was pretty heartbroken. And then excuse me, I went to Hamilton, Ohio. I had a family there, and I was visiting them. And I went to a bar one night, and while I was sitting in the bar, there was karaoke going on. And the DJ announced a guy. He said, ladies and gentlemen, guy who's getting ready to sign a contract with the WWF, Kurt Dubois. And Kurt comes up, oh, thank you, and he does his song and whatever else. And when Kurt gets done singing, I asked him, I said, well, where do you wrestle at around here? And he told me where he wrestled at. I said, well, who's the guy who trained you? And he told me the guy's name, and he happened to be one of the guys that was down south. Now, my first intention was to go over there and beat this guy's ass, really and truly, because I felt so stupid, like I had been taken. But when I walked into his gym that next day, where these young guys were working out, the minute I walked in, this guy starts putting me over in front of all of his boys. Oh, man, nice to see you again, man. You guys got to see this guy, man. He can go, man. He can go. So I didn't have any more wrestling knowledge than when I was at Al Snow's, but I've got this guy blowing up my ego, making me think I'm the best thing in the fucking world. You know what I mean? And asked me if I wanted to wrestle that night. And sure enough, I wrestled that night on one of his shows with no more knowledge than I had before. But the good thing that came from that's where I met Tarek the Great. Tarek was training with this same guy. So, excuse me. We started out there. We worked out with him for a while. And then the deal came around that Les Thatcher was looking to open up and help Jim Cornette spread out Smoky Mountain.